Okay, hello everybody. Hopefully people have joined us. Thank you for waiting patiently and for joining us tonight. My name is Paul Gedoldig. I'm the CEO of the Peninsula Jewish Community Center, broadcasting to you live from my basement here. But wanted to just welcome everyone and say thank you for attending. This is one of my favorite events that the PJCC helps put together, in part because we get to bring together friends and colleagues from the different synagogues, from some of the different synagogues in the North Peninsula. Some of the people speaking tonight have become friends of mine, professional colleagues. I've traveled on buses in Israel with some of them, so it's great to bring them together. I see from our chat that we already have 95 participants joining us this evening. So just to give you a sense of the size of the community. This event, again, really plays into one of the strengths and key roles we see for the PJCC, that being as serving as a role as a convener, as a host for the community, where we bring together people of all ages, young and old, people from different denominations, those who are affiliated, unaffiliated, Jewish, non-Jewish, etc. And we're in addition to this, we have other programs that are happening. It's not too late to check out the Elul, preparing for high holidays like never before. And a brand new announcement that we're just making now. The PJCC is joining the Atlanta JCC and hundreds of other JCCs across the country. That starting this Friday, there's going to be a virtual Jewish book festival. And we're going to have 18 different big name authors who will be speaking and presenting. There'll be information on our website at pjcc.org in the next few days. We hope you'll participate for that. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over in just a second to Rabbi Lavey Derby, who will do introductions for this evening. And when we usually traditionally end the Passover Seder, we say next year in Jerusalem. I'll end my intro to this year's Rabbis Roundtable by saying next year, hopefully in person. We miss being together in person, but we're also very thankful that we have each other as a community and that we can gather together in this way. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lavey.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome everyone. We're so glad you're joining us for this, our 10th annual Rabbis Roundtable. This is, in fact, the 10th time our community has come together to do this. This year, our theme is planting ourselves at the gates of hope, a unique high holiday journey in the time of COVID. This is such an extraordinary time. And our question is, what can the high holidays, our liturgy, our traditions, our rituals, what Jewish wisdom is there in these holidays that can help us enter into the new year with at least some modicum of hope? So this is our 10th annual Rabbis Roundtable, as I've said, and the Rabbis Roundtable is both an example of and a testament to the unique and remarkable Jewish community that we have on the North Peninsula. It is an extremely collegial and collaborative Jewish community, and it is a strong, unified Jewish community in which we actually enjoy going into each other's synagogues, learning from each other's rabbis, and the Rabbis Roundtable is simply a perfect example of how our community comes together. The program is also a testament to our wonderful community clergy, because each year, 4 of them take precious time from their own personal and communal preparation for the holidays to bring us together to learn as one community, And this evening, we are blessed to have with us Rabbi Lisa Kingston and Bill Futornick and Rabbi Lisa Delson and Rabbi Corey Helfand. They will be our guides for this evening's program. And I am enormously grateful to the 4 of you for taking the time and being willing to share the wisdom that you have with all of us in the community as we come into a new year. So for all of you who are in the audience, here are a few reminders about participating in this program. As the audience, you do not have control over your video and your microphone. You can't turn on your microphone and you cannot turn on the video. You will see the panelists, the 5 of us actually, but that's all that you will see on the screen. You will not be seeing each other. This is meant to have an interactive section of the program, and you can write questions to the panelists, to the rabbis. If you look at the very bottom of your screen, you will see that there's a button that says Q&A. It's here. And you will see that there is a button that says chat. If you want to ask a question, write your question in the Q&A box, not in the chat. We'll collect all the questions in the Q&A box, and then the rabbis will engage in answering your questions verbally during the last part of the program, the last 30 or 35 minutes of the program or so. But if you like, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the program. So let's begin. Let's begin. And to help us begin our conversation, I want to read for you a poem. It is called The Cure. It's coming up on your screen, so you can follow along. I chose this poem because there was something about it that felt to me like it was important to discuss as we enter into the holidays. The Cure by Albert Hofstadter. We think we get over things. We don't get over things. Or say we get over the measles, but not a broken heart. We need to make that distinction. The things that become part of our experience never become less a part of our experience. How can I say it? The way to get over a life is to die. Short of that, you move with it. Let the pain be the pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in. Find its place in the shape of things, and be then not any less pain, but true to form. Because anything natural has an inherent shape and will flow towards it. And life is as natural as a leaf. That's what we're looking for. Not the end of a thing, but the shape of it. Wisdom is seeing the shape of your life without obliterating, getting over a single instant of it. Wisdom is seeing the shape of your life without obliterating, getting over a single instant of it. So our program this evening is a conversation. It's not a formal teaching. It's a conversation among colleagues. And what I'd like to begin with is, what does it mean to say we don't get over things? Is that really right? What does it mean that we have to see the shape of our lives without even obliterating a single instant of it. And how does this relate to the high holidays, if it does at all? Would someone like to begin? I think you're all muted, so go ahead. Lisa Delson.
Sure, I'll jump in there. Good evening, everyone. I think it relates highly to the High Holy Days, because what we are meant to do in our process of teshuvah and throughout all of our tefillot during the High Holy Days is to lay bare who we have been and what we've become over the past year. And we do talk about the idea of wiping the slate clean and ending Yom Kippur on this kind of fresh note, but we know deep down that all of the things that we've done have become part of who we are, and they shape us, and those things will shape us for the coming year and the coming year and the coming year. And I think it's all part of it, even though we talk about it in terms of returning to ourselves, returning to the people that we want to be. We know that that's actually not what we're doing. We're just adding on. The years add up, and so do our experiences, and so does everything else that we've become or that we've experienced.
So it's interesting, if we don't get over things, how do we make them a part of our lives? What does teshuvah mean in that context? And everyone feel free to jump in.
I think that there's a difference between getting over and moving forward. You know, there's a sense sometimes of getting over, like sublimating feelings, you know, and we have so many rituals. This is one of them, you know, our morning rituals are those as well, where we're not getting over. You know, we are moving forward, though. Our morning rituals govern our actions, and we do actions. You know, on Yom Kippur, we do actions like this, and we say things that are supposed to help us with healing, and they're supposed to help us move forward, but they're not there to completely cure us. You know, I mean, even in this poem where we talk about the measles, you know, you still have scars and scabs from the measles. You still remember the experience, most likely, of the measles, unless you were very, very young. And certainly others would hold on to measles that someone else had and it was close to them. So I think the notion of getting over things I think it's actually a harmful piece of our society, whereas you have to get over it, you know. And I think that holding on to it, processing it, learning from it, moving forward from it, not repeating our mistakes, et cetera, I think that's a huge piece for us of the high holidays.
Bill, I wonder if I could actually add a really interesting nuance to what you just said about moving forward. I wonder if it's not about moving forward from, but moving forward with. What does it mean to take that which came before us and bring it into our narrative today in a way that shapes us? I wonder if that's part of the mistranslation of the word tshuva. You know, in modern Hebrew, tshuva means answer. If you ask a she'elah, a question, then you get a tshuva, you get an answer. In rabbinic tradition and even in biblical tradition, it means to return. It means to come back to. And I don't necessarily know that it means to come back to that which was, because we want to move on from it, but maybe perhaps to reinvestigate the parts that have always been a part of who we are and to bring them forward with us as we continue to change and to check in with ourselves. You know, most of the texts that we have that we read from the 9th of Av until Rosh Hashanah are the same ones we read every single year. It's the same haftarot of challenge and of comfort, and the same haftarot and the same passages on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The difference in the text is not the text, it's how we read it. It's how we show up and enter into that space. And so I wonder if tshuva should actually be reinterpreted. It's how do we return to the core pieces that we're still wrestling with, that we've always been wrestling with, that we're going to continue to wrestle with, and move forward in an honest way with integrity, because those are parts of who we are that we have to keep grappling with. Because we don't ever really completely change because we bring those stories forward with us.
I was
Rabbi
also
Lisa Kingston?
Yeah, I was also thinking when Bill, you mentioned those morning rituals, that was where the imagery that I turned to as well of, the idea that, we have 7 days after a loss, we have 30 days after a loss, 11 months, 2 years, and that each time we come back to that place, our feelings of pain, haven't, they haven't gone away, and our love or memory for people that we've lost never go away, but it's that we, evolve and we grow and change and learn. So I thought that analogy really works for this poem. When we have painful, I think this poem also is really talking about painful experiences. Not just our behavior or things that we want to change, but those parts of life that have really disappointed us and really left us disillusioned or even have really challenged our faith. And I think that it also asks us not to, again, we can't, it affirms that we can't get over those experiences, but we can't keep going if we're holding on to that anger and disappointment and disillusionment. We have to turn it into some kind of learning or lesson or growth. And that's the challenge of Teshuvah for us personally, again, not interpersonally.
Lisa, the line that really woke me up in this poem was the line that says, "Let the pain be the pain. Let the pain be the pain." What a very hard message to hear. Don't we just humanly want the pain to go away? So the morning ritual that you and Bill are describing is a very powerful model for how we do that. But when the pain is our disappointments in life, when the pain is the wrongs that we've done to people we love, what does it all mean to let the pain be the pain?
Right. We have to sit with it. The only way past it, and again, in the wording of this poem is to own it and to be with it. Let it shape you, but not let it ruin you. I think there are plenty of ways that we as human beings cope with pain that are the unhealthy ways, whether they're lashing out, whether they're abusing drugs or alcohol, or any kind of thing that can make us feel as if the pain is down here. Anything that lets us keep going. But what I think so many of us have learned, right, again, and this poem is saying, it's like, no, it's like you can push it down, you can subdue it, but you can't overcome it unless you confront it, unless you deal with it head on, and that's our challenge.
There's something to be said about thinking about pain in a radically different way today, because perhaps more than ever, we're all experiencing pain in the same moment, in the same reality. I imagine that some of us woke up this morning, looked outside, and thought we should go back to bed because it was still nighttime. But there was pain in the world this morning in seeing the color of the sky the way that it was. And if it's not the pandemic, it's something else, and it's every day. In many ways, we're sharing pain in ways that we never have before, or that the pain that was hidden from view is now visible in ways that it never was before. And I wonder what it looks like to be able to open ourselves up to not just let the pain be pain, but to recognize that other people are in pain too. And if we can create space for seeing each other's pain and letting them see ours, if that creates an opportunity for a different kind of hope to emerge, rather than feeling so hidden from view. In many ways, one of the silver linings of this whole thing may be that there's a shared experience in pain that we haven't been able to put our fingers on before until now. And it's just so obvious, and we feel it in such a real and visceral way that it's right in front of our faces.
Anybody else?
Rabbi Lisa.
Well, I was just going off of what Corey was saying in terms of our communal and individual pain. I still think that as individuals, we might be okay with letting our pain be pain. But in communal settings, oftentimes we still try to hide it and we don't want to show it. And we feel ashamed potentially of actually sharing what we're feeling when we are in pain. I mean, to add on to the list, Corey, that you were saying, you know, the pain of not being able to see family who live far away, you know, the pain of having to watch children be at home for school, the pain of, you know, people having to put off cancer treatments because it's unsafe to go to the hospital. I mean, these are all things that bring us hope and look towards the future. And I think we're just now starting to be able to talk about it. And even the talking about it causes pain, and because it's just so new and there's so much feeling that these are normal things that we have been able to do and accomplish and know and see, and we're not able to right now. And in terms of COVID, today was an anomaly. I hope tomorrow we wake up and there's sunshine. The morning blessings, I was thinking about it earlier today, will have so much more meaning when we can see the blue sky and the sun again. It's unbelievable. I had a quote from Lamentations that I think speaks to this idea of recalling our distress and our pain. And it's from the third chapter of Lamentations, and it says, "To recall my distress and my misery was wormwood and poison." So it's a little bit of the opposite of what we're saying, that maybe we're able to discuss our pain in a productive way, but this is Lamentations. "Whenever I thought of them, I was bowed low, but this do I call to mind. Therefore I have hope. The kindness of the Lord has not ended. God's mercies are not spent. They are renewed every morning. Ample is your grace. The Lord is my portion. I say with a full heart, therefore I will hope in him," in God. So I think, you know, connecting ourselves to our ancient texts and seeing how we're different and how we might view pain in a new way, as accepting, or as at least acknowledging that to share pain is not a shameful thing.
Well, that's pretty powerful. Bill, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think Rabbi Lisa, did you have something before me, Kingston? Oh, okay. You know, a couple of things. One is that I was watching Rabbi Sachs, Jonathan Sachs, on YouTube. He has his Elul messages. I watched the first one, and he was talking about faith versus insecurity, you know, and the need for faith, and how the pieces of insecurity described really were pieces of pain. It's what we as a people have gone through over millennia, you know, starting with Mitzrayim when we were in Egypt. And it's a very powerful thing to say, you know, that faith is a big driver here of our ability to have hope, that we can have faith that there is an outcome based on past outcomes, that while those are still part of our master story, there's a faith that we will emerge from it stronger, we'll emerge from it together. Which was really for me a very powerful message. And I was thinking, just Rabbi Lisa, as you were just mentioning the Lamentations quote, it brought to mind the quote from Psalm 91, in which God says, you know, when he calls on me, I'll answer him and I'll be with him in distress, right? And the idea that God is actually praying as well, that God is by our side here, and that there's a faith that we have that comes out of our tradition. Which I think is sometimes difficult to access, right? I really, you know, just to give voice to it, I don't think that we always are saying, yes, God is walking alongside him, and we wake up and the sky is orange, right? Like it's tenuous, but I think that in the broader picture that we can try and find that faith together. But the other piece, and this is something actually, Rabbi Lisa Kingston, as you were speaking before, I was thinking about going back to Egypt. There's another piece, which is that the pain that we had as slavery, right, that is our master story. And what are we supposed to do with that? When we have our seders, right, we when you come out of the seder and you think, wow, that was a great brisket, or that was wonderful eggplant, that's not the point. The point is we emerge from that pain of slavery in a way that drives us to improve the world, right? To remove pain from the world. And so the more we can try and do that, I think, that becomes like Viktor Frankl, right? Our search for meaning, that we emerge from pain looking for meaning in ways that we prevent others' pain.
Bill, you're quoting Rabbi Sachs reminds me that I read from him, I guess, last week, that he wrote that hope is the quintessential Jewish dynamic. I love that term, quintessential Jewish dynamic. And the Passover story is our master story of Exodus, is exactly that. We say we're the people who go from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light, from mourning into joy, from being constricted into spaciousness. This is the dynamic of what it means to be the Jewish people. And I guess if one has a very, very strong faith in God, that maybe that is the way that it works, that we can have hope. But we're looking at a very uncertain future in all different kinds of ways. Our future in the new year is completely uncertain. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We can't know how it's going to turn out. So I guess part of my question is, where does one go to find that hope? Where is that hope? I love the quote from Lamentations, Echa, it's beautiful. The poet there goes to God. Maybe that's where we have to go. Or maybe there's another source of hope.
I was turning back to the poem, Lavey, that you shared about this idea. I'm looking at this line: let the pain be pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in, find its place in the shape of things. And I think that so many times pain really, it shakes our faith to the core. Rightfully so. In these moments where, again, where life disappoints us, how could we not ask, where was God? Or how can I believe in the same way that I did? And I think that this time is also challenging us not to not have faith, but to have to re-examine what our relationship is to God and the world that we want and the world that we hope for, and our role in it. So I think that these are opportunities that are crucial, to come about every so often to make sure that we're not just maintaining an old narrative of, slavery to freedom, to whatever that master narrative we cling on to, but to say maybe for us it needs to change. And I don't have an answer right now of what faith should look like or could look like. I think that's every individual's job. But this idea that our goal is to return to faith, holding the pain and holding the new experiences, holding the change, and then move forward.
It's much harder work to do it that way, but maybe that's what we're being guided to here.
I think there's another part of our master narrative that's not only about the Exodus from Egypt. It's that in leaving Egypt, part of what we took on for ourselves was that we were never going to stop working toward some kind of promised land, right? If you want to quote Michael Walzer, so to speak. We're going to be on that journey forever. And one of the reasons that we're still here is that we never gave up the journey. I actually would push back on the poem a little bit, because the line that says, how can I say it? The way to get over a life is to die, is perhaps the opposite of the Jewish narrative. Right? In the Torah reading on Yom Kippur, we're going to say, Uvacharta b'chaim, we should choose life. And that's always been our narrative. Or if you look at the Unatana Tokef as an example, it's not that we're not going to have experiences of who's going to live by this and who's going to die by that, who's going to live by, we'll call it wildfires versus pandemic, or whichever one of the plagues you'd like to insert this year that is quite apropos. But that's always going to be part of our reality. The part that we all come together to sing is Uteshuva, Utefila, Utsedaka, that repentance and prayer and acts of kindness are going to ma'avirin et roa hagzera. You could say that it's to overturn the decree, but I wonder if it means ma'avirin is to help us make a bridge so that we can somehow go over the ra, the bad that is in our world, that allows us to continue to navigate, right? That continues to give us the will to live and to find that sense of hope in the doing. As much as we are a people of faith, we are also a people who do. And that was also part of the Exodus narrative. We came out to receive a covenant and a tradition that now puts us as partners with God to be able to go out and make the change. So we can be upset and we can feel helpless and we can feel hopeless at times, but we also must pick up the other part of the mantle, which is that we have a responsibility to keep acting and to keep living, even if it's not perfect and even if it doesn't ever become the way that we want, even if it's not curable. Even if we have to carry all of those pieces with us for the rest of our life, we still have to pick up that mantle, and that allows us to ma'avir, to kind of walk over the challenges as we keep trying to build something better.
Last year, in preparation for the High Holy Days, I read the book called Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. And one of the paragraphs that stuck out to me is actually so related, Corey, to what you were just saying. It said, hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes. You are alone, or you are in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and knowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists take the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. This is the part. It's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact, are not things we can know beforehand. Or perhaps studying the record more carefully leads us to expect miracles, not when and where to expect them, but to expect to be astonished, to expect that we don't know. And this is the grounds to act. So this part about expecting that things will happen, that we can be surprised with life, that's the hope to get us through. That's the bridge to get us over that we don't know. We don't know what will happen to us this year. Exactly using Unatana Tokef as an example. But our hopefulness comes through trying to figure out what's going to get us there, that we can expect that something will happen. And hopefully positive if you're an optimist, and some potentially negative if you're a pessimist. But hopefully we can see it somewhere in between.
You know, the first part of that quote that you read us, Lisa, about the space in between, I've actually been thinking a lot this last month about the space in between. Because I practice a lot of meditation. And one of the things you notice is that in between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath, there's a little space. It's just a little space, tiny, it's minuscule, but it's there, nothing, no breath. And also at the end of the out-breath, before the in-breath, there's a little space. And then I found this lovely teaching by Parker Palmer, who's this great writer on education and philosopher, and he writes about finding the edge. The edge is where something that has just happened ends, and just before the next thing happens, maybe there's a space there too. And I thought what your quote was pointing us to is we have to look to that space to where the two edges just barely touch and are connected by that space. And in that space, it's not really empty. Maybe it's full of possibility, and maybe it's full of hope.
That reminds me of the tradition of putting the first, at the end of Yom Kippur, putting the first pole up for the Sukkot, and how there's this hopefulness that those are not 5 empty days, but those are days of preparation, that it's a continuation of the themes and the narrative of the High Holy Days leading into this festival of joy. So maybe it's that little break, that little edge right there. I like that. Thank you.
And it's that one small action that you can take. It's that you have to do something. I don't know what to do, but I can put the pole in the ground and start building and see where that leads.
Yeah, somewhere between our past with its failures and its hurts and its disappointments, in our future, which is yet unknown, is that space. And I guess, to go back to Corey's point, it's in that space that we can decide to do something.
Lavey, I wonder if that's part of what the poem is speaking about toward the end. That's what we're looking for, not the end of a thing, but the shape of it, right? If you see the edge as the end, then you're not actually visualizing the full shape of what's possible. And if you think about on Yom Kippur at night at Kol Nidre, we read this beautiful piyut called Ki Hine Kachomer, which imagines that we're all kind of artisans, the creators of our own, I guess, destiny or something, where the God is the master artisan and uses all different kinds of materials to mold us and to shape us into what's possible. I wonder if those are all of the different edges that we have, where we have the capacity to make ourselves into what is not yet. We can see ourselves as a stopping point, or we can see ourselves as this constantly changing and evolving entity that we have the power to shape and to refashion over and over again. So coming to the edge, we could see it as a cliff and we just fall off, or we can see it as the start of something new. And perhaps that malleability of the human soul and of the relationships that we have severed and have the potential to rebuild, or the world that we have broken that we have the potential to rebuild, is there in the possibility of shaping it into something new.
You know, that reminds, so Gordon Tucker taught on Unatana Tokef at Hartman this year, and in his shiur, he talked about the metaphors of Unatana Tokef at the end of the poem, which are, there are 8 different things we're compared to, withering grass, etc. But the first one is earthenware pieces. And he said, you know, earthenware pieces are not a metaphor. They're actually very real. And that if you think about how we were created from the dust of the earth, right? We actually, earthenware is from the earth. And earthenware, when it's not subject to impurity from outside. You know, there's all this stuff about impurity in vessels, you know, until they break. And that earthenware is not, it's only what's inside that can make the outside impure. You can't shove impurity into it, and saying that what's really important is the container that we are, what's inside of that, our airspace within this earthenware vessel. And, you know, it's our substance. And talked about Unatana Tokef, you know, there's a lot of stuff we can't control, that's true. But there's a lot of stuff we can control, right? There's a lot of things in there. And so the other piece is that earthenware, you know, when it breaks, you put it back together, okay? And you try to refuse earthenware, but earthenware basically is made of nothing. It's like when we create something out of it, then it becomes something. And that when you refuse the pieces, there's a future for this, right? It's broken. And now it's put back together, and it's comparing it to when our hearts break. You know, our hearts break, and then we have to put them back together. You know, it's not I don't know, it comes pure again, but it becomes something that helps us move forward. And we, you know, when something's broken, you still see the cracks in it, but it's still usable, right? As you move forward with it.
Wow. So there is a sense of carrying our brokenness Because brokenness, I think, Bill, you're saying brokenness is real.
Right.
And we experience it, and it's we carry that brokenness somehow with us continually, although maybe we let it take a shape that we can bear. Now, you all have undoubtedly had the experience of having congregants or other people come to talk to you before the high holidays. It's usually right in the middle of when you're finishing your sermon or trying to finish your sermons. They come in and need to talk to you right at that moment.
Trying to start your sermon.
Start your sermon.
Thank you.
Yes. And people may come in and say to you, this is the terrible thing that I have done, and I'm carrying this terrible guilt, and I'm carrying this terrible shame. I don't know how I can bear this. How can I move forward? They might even say to you, please, Rabbi, take it away from me, which we're probably not able to do. But what do you say to them? How do they bear it? How do they use it? How do they move forward with the brokenness?
There's a great part of the Torah reading on the first day of Rosh Hashanah when we read about Sarah and Hagar and about Ishmael and Isaac. And there's the moment where Hagar is out in the wilderness and she has to turn away. She can't look at the fact that her son is about to die from malnourishment. And there's this instance where God actually says to take his hand, his yad, in hers. And I think there's something really profound about the idea of responding by saying, you're not alone in this, and that I actually can reach out my hand. I know that it works a little bit differently now with COVID and we can't actually touch each other in the same way, but I think it's the idea of joining someone in that experience and saying that wherever you are in your process, in your journey, that I can be in that with you. And what was powerful about the moment with Hagar is that Hagar was unable to see that she could extend the hand on her own. It was someone else who had to do it. In this case, it's God, perhaps the most powerful metaphor of all. And for someone who comes to see us or comes to talk to anyone for that matter, they often can't see that there is a hand in front of them that's being extended. And I wonder what it looks like for us to be that hand, especially in moments when we can't be proximate in the same way, to more intentionally reach out in new and creative ways that would allow us to really say, you're not alone in this. And sometimes we focus too much on the solution and not enough on just in the being in the moment, which is also embedded in this poem. Can I just sit with you in this and let you know that I'm with you, and here's my hand physically or spiritually or whatnot, so that we can figure out how to walk together in the ups and the downs that will come from this particular space and time.
Rabbi Lisa mentioned before, that one of this maybe hidden blessings of COVID is that we are all more willing to share how we're struggling in this time, that we're all reaching out to each other because we need that connection. And I think that shame gets its power from being shameful, from being told that you have to be ashamed of this. You can't share this. You have to keep it a secret. You can't own it. And just that process of heshbon hanefesh, just that process of going through and recognizing and naming and saying, this has been part of me. This is something that I experienced, and then sharing it with someone that you trust, whether it's a clergy or a friend or, even a larger community, is taking away shame's power. So again, I agree with Rabbi Corey that idea of being able to share it, being able to sit in it, and being able to say you're not alone in this is what can help take those feelings of, I'm alone in this, I did this, I I'm terrible. It's like, no, actually, you're struggling with what everyone else is.
That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. I mean, we say the confessional 10 times traditionally over Yom Kippur. We are encouraged to name it.
Well, and we say it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And we say it together. We say it Ashamnu. You know, we all did these things. We all named the things, whether we did them or not. You know, as a way of saying we all do all of this, and it's not one person's to have to bear.
But I think what you're teaching us is, or teaching me is, you can't carry this. You can't carry the brokenness unless you name it. Unless you're willing to own it, name it, own it, see it. And then, as you say, it loses its strength. You suck the wind out of it by simply, this is real, and now the next step.
Yeah, I think that the story of Hagar, in particular, the next point, you know, the next step of the story was that after God asked her to hold out her hand, then she lifts up her eyes and she's able to see her sustenance, and she's able to see her salvation, her son's salvation. And then the next verse is that he too, you know, will be reminded that he'll become a great nation. And so without getting to those, you know, starting in this very dark place and having another being help you out of that, you know, take one step out, and then there's another step out, and then there's another step out. There's movement when you can name, exactly like what you were saying, Lavey, when you can name whatever it is that you've been going through or that you've experienced. I think there's a great power in that.
I love that, and I love the image of just, you hold your hand out, you know, that we don't know that the hand is there sometimes, you know, that presence is there, you know, and one of the things about the holidays is that they're incredibly intensely individual and they're incredibly intensely communal at the same time, you know. And when we say Kol Nidre, you know, the whole community is there and we're all freeing each other at the same time. It's not just the vows, the oaths, etc., right? It's like that whole list of things. I like to call it spiritual schmutz, you know? It's like all that stuff that just builds up, all the things we could have been or should have been or, you know, did and shouldn't have. You know, we're all together and that we're not frozen in that. You know, the pain that we've caused ourselves or others have caused us or we've caused others, that doesn't define us, you know? And as you're talking, it's a question of who has control? You know, does our pain control us, or are we able to somehow control the pain, not get rid of the pain? It's like the story of the Yetzer Hara, right? The evil inclination. And they don't destroy it. In our prayers every morning, we say, let us control it. We need it. But we don't need it to have mastery over us. We need to be able to master it. And so the pain works in, but we need to be able to keep it at a level and help each other into that.
Yeah, I think you're saying something that's really quite wise there. At least someone once said to me, or I heard someone say, what this person did is what they did. It's not who they are. And that may be the second most powerful thing I ever heard about how to be with someone in this. But the most powerful thing is what you've all said about reaching out your hand. To say to somebody, you are not alone in this.
And you are not your pain.
Such a powerful comfort.
Lavey, you know, you're not your pain. I think sometimes, and I've seen this with people who kind of, they want to be in pain. It's not that they you know, it's not that they like it, but it's like they can't let it go. And they let it define who they are. It's like when someone's sick, you know, you don't want to look at them, people don't want to say they're sick because then you look at them as their illness, right?
Right.
You don't want to be your pain, but sometimes you don't know how to get rid of it.
Yeah, Rachel and Naomi Remen decades ago wrote beautiful books teaching people that we are not our illness. The illness doesn't define us. We are not our pain. The pain doesn't define us. And we are not our brokenness. The brokenness doesn't define us. We carry it, but it doesn't necessarily have to define us. We don't have to let it. And I want to go back to something that Corey, you said earlier about when you, it seems to me when you have this experience of pain, of brokenness, in naming it and seeing it and knowing it, there is this possibility that out of knowing it, there will grow some real compassion for others as well as for yourself. And maybe that's what helps us know what we're supposed to do in that empty space, is have compassion for ourselves and offer to others.
That might actually be the thing we all need more tshuva around, is both the sense of compassion for other and compassion for self. I have to remember every day in homeschooling 3 children and living in the same space and working and supporting everyone, how much I need to breathe, but also how much I need to have compassion on all of the different people that are involved, the teachers and the administrators and the team at Shul and myself and my partner and all of these different things. And I think we may have actually forgotten what it's like to have compassion for others in this state of the world. I saw it a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic when we were still trying to figure out what it looks like. And it was a beautiful moment where neighbors were talking to each other and friends were reaching out and they were setting up weekly Zoom calls to talk with family members and to connect in different ways. And somehow when we started to reemerge, we lost some of the element of compassion that we had quickly turned toward. And I wonder if we need to now return to as part of our own practice. That might be a place of our own need to find cure, if you will, from the poem, is to reinsert that sense of compassion for other and for self as part of our personal tshuva.
So we'll open up to answer the questions that people have posed in the Q&A box, and you can take a look at them if you like. But before we do that, given everything that's been said here, and given the fact that we are facing an unprecedented time of different plagues, all coming at us all at once, where's the place that you find hope? How do you, the 4 of you, the 5 of us, how do we find hope? What in these holidays gives us hope that we will be able to go into the new year and have it be better, maybe make it better?
So I don't know if this answers your question about hope, but I've been turning to this text that reminds me that we can continue to overcome. And maybe I'm not quite ready to hope yet, but I'm at least, know that I have to face each day with whatever it brings, whether it's an orange sky or whatever's next. And I was thinking of this story from Talmud about Rabbi Gamliel, who witnesses, he's at sea and he witnesses a shipwreck from afar. And he is so distraught over all of the Talmid Chacham that were on the ship that drowned, and that, that he's just distressed. And he gets ashore, he comes ashore and finds Rabbi Akiva, who is on the boat, and Rabbi Akiva is sitting on the sand and he's studying Torah and he's teaching Torah, and Rabbi Gamliel is amazed to see him, and he says, how did you survive that? And Rabbi Akiva's answer was basically, well, I found a plank and I grabbed onto it, and then I greeted each wave that came with a nod. And I love this story because I love, first of all, the imagery, and I feel like we are so living it, of just one wave after another, where, that the shore is really far away. But if we can latch on to anything, and we can, with a change in our attitude, perhaps, just greet each wave, greet each challenge with, you know, that feeling that I can overcome it. Greet it with a nod, greet it with, here you are today and here I am, and we're gonna get through this. You know, that somewhere you know that there is a shore, that there is land. And if you get stuck in the grief of the shipwreck, you're not going to go anywhere. And if you get stuck in the obstacle of the waves, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's all about continuing to face each challenge, continuing to keep going, and just knowing that there is a land, you know, somewhere.
Thank you.
I love that story, Lisa. And what, you know, Rabbi Akiva grabs a plank, and wouldn't you know that the next part of the story is that Rabbi Akiva's out on a boat and he sees Rabbi Meir's ship go down, right? And the same thing happens, and they come back to shore, and he comes back to shore, and they're studying the halacha, right? They're studying this amazing, continuity. And he says, "How did you survive?" And he says, "Well, I rode the waves." He surfed. And I think that there's a real hope that there are different ways to get through this, right? Like, you hold on to each other. Maybe you can do it yourself. Maybe you're surfing together, but that there are these different ways to do it, and that you can hold on to an amazingly robust tradition, that we have a really strong core tradition, and that tradition will help carry us forward. So I love that story. Thank you.
Thanks for part two.
I wasn't sure what to say, and I was thinking about all these different things, like, oh, I'll say that.
Anybody else?
I think one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of what's giving me hope, or what's maintaining hope, is that hope for me is related to action, and that hope by itself is fine, and for some people it really works. So going back to what Bill said, there's lots of ways, but hope combined with action is in some way has the feeling of productivity. And what I'm seeing from so many people, as we heard earlier, that when people come together and they're able to do things, that for me, that's what's getting me through. The idea of calling somebody who is struggling, it gives them hope, and it gives me hope. Writing postcards to encourage people to vote, doing whatever we can to make sure that our community feels together, and thinking outside of the box, coming up with new ways of engagement and new ways of connection. That's what gives me hope in this moment, because I think without that, it's easy to sit in our houses literally all day with nowhere to go. All of the things that we used to find fun outside of our houses are a little off limits. And but taking action in other ways offers me hope.
A couple of things I was thinking about. There's a little passage that's kind of tucked into the Amidah of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it starts with the words Misod Chachamim Unevonim, which is like the secret wisdom, if you will, of all of the sages. And we heard some of it with part one from Rabbi Lisa Kingston, and then for part two with Bill Futornick. And we just heard another piece of the wisdom with regard to action. So there's so much wisdom in our tradition that has been guiding us for centuries. And I think one of the amazing things that came out of the destruction of the temple was this watershed moment of reimagination of self. And what does it look like to say, we're going to keep doing this, we're going to keep figuring it out, we're going to keep reinventing ourselves after the most catastrophic thing that we could have ever experienced in our history. And in some ways, that wisdom is there for us to pick up and to continue forward with. And there's been so much creativity and so much reimagining that has happened. And so I think I draw some hope from that. I also draw some hope from one of the final pieces of the liturgy, which is Hayom, not just because it's fun to see how many times the cantor or whomever can say Hayom before the end of the song, but there's something about the power of living in the moment of now and of today I know it's always on our minds what's going to happen next and how we're going to get through it, but can we also embrace the present of this particular moment and see the things that we ought to be grateful for and to appreciate in this moment that are actually going on around us, that are not all doom and gloom. And I think that gives me a sense of hope. And the last, which I think in some ways dovetails with Rabbi Delson's comment, is that there's a little parable about a person who was crying out to God in response to all of the injustices and the sufferings that happened in the world. And the person says, "Dear God, I see so many people suffering. Why haven't you sent help?" And in a moment, God responded and said, I did send help. I sent you. And sometimes I think that we often look too far when the answer for hope is right in front of us or perhaps within us. And I don't want to lose sight of that as well. There is tremendous capacity within each of us to be able to make all kinds of change. And that's part of what it means to be partners with God. And I don't want to lose sight of that. There's hope in that possibility.
Well, that is all so beautiful. Thank you to the four of you for offering these amazing, these beautiful and amazing wise teachings to us. We're going to take some questions that members of the audience have put into the Q&A. And if anyone has a question that they would like to ask, there's still an opportunity. Just type it into the Q&A box, and we'll see it and have the opportunity to look at it. I just, on the question of hope, I just want to add one more piece. It's always striking to me that at least at this point in my life, breath flows fairly easily and all by itself. And it comes, and then it goes. And then it comes, and then it goes. And our beloved colleague, Rabbi Alan Liu of blessed memory, wrote beautifully about this passage right before we sing Kol Nidre, in which there's a little kind of pseudo-halachic statement of intention that says we permit ourselves to pray with avar yanim, which everyone always translates as sinners, from avera, sin. We're allowed to pray with avar yanim, which is a good thing to say because that's who we all are. Everyone is. That's the way we're created. We're just simply human beings, imperfect. That was the design. But Rabbi Liu read it from avar, that which passes, and he read it as like breath. It's impermanent. You know, right now the world looks like it's filled with plague and trauma and pain. And this too shall pass. This is also impermanent. We don't know exactly how, or when, or in what way, but maybe everything that arises will also, at some point, pass into becoming something else. And with that, perhaps I can hold on to some hope. So here's a question. How can this poem help us be brave enough to seek forgiveness from others? And I'm going to add to that. How can the high holidays help us be brave enough to seek forgiveness from others? And then I'll add on to that, how can you help us be brave enough to seek forgiveness from others?
I think part of it is what you just said, Lavey, about all of us being in that same boat. You know, we're all sinners. We all have flaws, and the person you need to seek forgiveness from has flaws as well, and has probably had to seek forgiveness. I think it actually, you have to back up and find the way to seek forgiveness from yourself first, and to forgive yourself. I think it really starts there, and then to move outward from there. Because it's a natural part of life that we hurt and are hurt. And honestly, I think that there's the fear that people will not grant us that forgiveness and that we won't be able to forgive ourselves. And so you know, I can only say that how would the poem help or the high holidays help? You know, it's natural. And I want to just quote a wonderful, wonderful sage of blessed memory, Ruth Shapiro, who was our educator at Beth Jacob for many, many years. And Ruth she would tell the kids this all the time, but she would say, only God is perfect. And it was very, very powerful. Whenever something, and I think to remember that is something that for me, it gives me bravery.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else?
You know, I think we're always weighing risk and reward, and I think we are especially weighing risk. You know, we know that phrase now in a different term, but you know, what is at risk if you don't address a conflict in a relationship, and what's at risk if you do? And if you don't, you know, if you don't address someone, if you don't offer forgiveness, if you don't ask for forgiveness, you know, nothing's going to change. So the bravery comes, going back to that theme of hope, it comes in that hope that something could be different. And we don't know what that different is going to look like, but we know that the status quo is no longer working for us. So we get to this point where we have to choose hope over fear, and we have to choose change over static. There, you know, it's not easy, and I'm not saying that it always works out for the good, but if there is something, if there's a rift in a relationship, or there's something that you need to get off your chest, or something that you need to ask for, it's not going to happen without you. So it goes back, I know Rabbi Lisa has been talking a lot about, you know, action, that's what offers her hope. And if that's what it is, that's what you have to do.
I wonder if there's an inherent problem in the title of this poem. When I first read it, The Cure, I was thinking, okay, great. I just have to read the poem and we're all good to go. Kind of like I just show up for Yom Kippur and then that's it, done deal. I've been absolved of all of my problems. Even the idea of like a vaccine, you know, the flu shot, if you will. Getting the flu shot doesn't mean that you're never going to get the flu. You could still get the flu. And hopefully it's not as bad. And who knows what this whole thing is with finding one for COVID. I could imagine that it just makes the symptoms better, a little bit more manageable. I have no idea. But the title wants to perhaps put forward this idyllic outcome. And I wonder if the whole point of the title is that by the end of the poem, we're going to totally say that that's not accurate anymore, that it's not about the cure. It's not about trying to get to some state of perfect. It's about how to live and embrace a bit more the discomfort of what it means to be on a journey toward maybe doing a little bit better. And if we go into the process of tshuva thinking that we're going to somehow magically come out with everything being better and everything going back to the way that it was, I think we may be missing the point. I wonder if it's about feeling brave enough to say, I want to take the first step on a long road, a lifelong road, that it might change me a little bit. And that each year I can chip away a bit more at the iceberg that is the repair that needs to happen. I'm reminded of the Midrash that when they finished the Holy of Holies, Moses put inside the Holy of Holies the broken tablets and the whole tablets as this beautiful reminder that we are never going to get back to whole again, and whole only exists by embracing the broken. And so the cure, according to the title of the poem, is not perfection. We need to perhaps change the expectation of what it means to go down this path of tshuva, of repentance. If we go in with the expectation that the only way is to make it perfect again, then not only will we not achieve tshuva or forgiveness or be brave enough to enter that space with ourselves or with others, we'll actually set ourselves up for more struggle, for more pain, for more brokenness. And so I wonder if it's about adjusting expectations. And the other piece I would say is that there is a tremendous opportunity this year, more so than any others, because in all other years, we knew exactly what to expect with the high holidays. But this year, we don't know what to expect. We have to pivot and be flexible all the time. this is the opportunity to make a choice to opt in and say, I want to be a part of this process in a way that I never have been before, because it would be just as easy to just turn off the screen and not engage at all. And to make the choice to say, I'm gonna opt into some aspect of this process will actually get us a little bit closer to whatever the cure might look like. But that's really ultimately on us to say, I wanna opt into something, even if it's not gonna be perfect, because it's the opting in that at least gets us started.
So there's a comment in the Q&A box. It says, if we get over it, we will lose the memory the next time the same situation arises. In that case, we may blunder through the same problem without a framework with which to face the problem again. So perhaps the hope is in actually knowing our past so that we can try not to repeat the same problem over again. There are a couple of really interesting questions about God. This one, what might be the edge of God? If there is one, how might we envision that and use that idea in our relationship with God and possibilities and faith? Does God have an edge? Is God the edge? What does that look like? Or shall we say we just don't know that much about God?
I don't really have a complete answer or thought to this, so bear with me on this. But I'm wondering if we can flip the question a little bit and figure out what our edge is in order to reach out to our understanding of God. Because ultimately, we have liturgy, we have prayer, we have song, we have silence, we have meditation. And these are all avenues in order to get us to understand God, or to try to define for ourselves what God is. We have what God is not, according to our traditional text, but what God is so self-defined. And unfortunately, I think the liturgy oftentimes is limiting, using words in gendered language and in imagery that we don't connect with today, that maybe past generations did connect with. But if we allow ourselves to grow on that edge and say, trying to figure out for ourselves, what could God be for me? What do I believe God is? What do I believe God isn't? Might help us get to that answer a little bit more clearly than asking, where is God's edge? I'm not at all criticizing the question, but I'm just trying to think about it in a way that we can, that might be manageable, at least manageable for me.
So I see some of you also want to chime in, but before you do, there's a second question, not a follow-up necessarily, but related. This question is, so where should we most look for God? Where should we most look for God? Edges, spaces, breath, hope, somewhere else? Where should we look? And where do you look? Lisa Kingston, it looks like you want to chime in.
Oh, I'm scared of this question, but
I think we all are scared of these questions.
You just keep saying the edge, and I think of you too, the good guitar player. So, but when you're asking about, how do we find God, or how do we think of God, especially on the High Holy Days, I'm thinking of the poem that we read, the Kianu Amecha, and we go through these lists of ways that we refer to God. God is our shepherd, and we are your sheep, and God is our portion. And I don't have the Moxar in front of me, so I can't even name them all. But what what I'm holding in that example is, how many metaphors there are. And maybe Rabbi Lisa, you were referring to this too, and none of them are totally, fully appropriate. But the fact that even in one prayer, we have 10 metaphors for ways that we can refer to God, it just is a reminder that it's not going to be the same for everyone. It's not going to be the same for us in each moment. You know, when we need God, when we are sick, might not be the way that we need God when we are healthy. When we, you know, the way that we need God when we are in a crisis is not when we need God when things are stable. So just to be open and be fluid and search for those metaphors that work in one moment, and also be willing to throw them out when they don't fit your theology again. And again, that's why I really love this. I keep going back to this line of the poem of like, let pain be pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in, that we get to define our faith. And, you know, again, and as certain experiences continue to shape us and reshape us, that faith is going to change and shift. And that is actually something that Judaism is beautiful in, that it is open to letting us, you know, to letting that relationship be ongoing and transforming.
Bill, did you want to say something?
You can go ahead, Corey. It's okay.
I'm happy to let you go first.
Oh, okay. I'll go first. I just, you know, I'm gonna completely change the question. I'm not looking for God on the edge. I actually, I really connect with the name of God, the name that we use for God as Hamakom, the place. You know, we talk about the place and like immanence of God, this incredibly expansive God, and the broadest possible perspective that God is simply everywhere where we let God in. And that, you know, for me, it's a striking thing that the name we use for God when we're comforting mourners is Hamakom. We say Hamakom Yinachem Etchem, right? May God comfort you. But, you know, Yinachem also is a word which is, it means comfort, but it also means to help change someone's perspective after the fact. And so what you're doing is you're helping a mourner, right? And kind of returning to this at the time of a person's most acute personal pain and grief. We look to God as this incredibly expansive force and it's us saying it, you know, it's not just God, it's us in part. You know, Corey, to your point about partnership with God, this covenant, our partnership with God here isn't saying we're going to have God here comfort you and hopefully change your perspective, but that's what we're here to do also. We're here for you in your moment of pain. We're here for you to let you know that this is real. This is something that you're experiencing and should experience, but that it's not the end, that there's light, and we'll move toward light together. Again, it kind of goes back to what I think what everyone was saying here, you know, that we come back to, we're here, we reach out our hand, and we can bring you beyond the narrowness of pain and into this breadth of comfort, this breadth which is Hamakom. So I kind of don't see God, I kind of punted the edge question by saying, you know, I see God as not an edge, but like all of it.
I was going to try to answer this in two different ways. One is the mystics would say that God is Ein Sof, so is without end, which might seem to suggest that there are no edges for God. It just kind of goes on forever. And I was thinking about that through the image that some of us are really going to miss this year, which is at Ne'ilah. Some have the practice of going up to the ark in the final moments before the gates are closed, so to speak. And there's this feeling as the gates close and the shofar is sounded that that's the end, like that's the edge. And that in that particular moment, we're sealed and it's official and we've figured out what the outcome will be for that year. But in many ways, it's not. There are all of these extensions in Jewish tradition. Yom Kippur is actually not the end of the judgment period. You could go into Sukkot, to Hoshana Rabbah, and to Shmini Atzeret, another time of judgment. And if you go into the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, there's this idea that Veshuv Yom Echad Lifnei Mitatcha, you should repent one day before you die. And in many ways, Jewish tradition is built on this idea of this cycle that we are always able to have another opportunity, another chance every time we're getting a little bit closer to the edge. And I wonder if maybe that's, if I can follow Rabbi Delson's idea of flipping the question a little bit, then maybe the question is not about God on the edges, but can we experience God when we're on the edge? And what does it look like in those moments when we're tested at our limits? Judaism would seem to suggest that there's always an opportunity to kind of pull back and to help us move away from the edge, because God is in all of those spaces. And is there capacity for us to open ourselves up to God when we're teetering? And I'm sure that that's a very real feeling for many of us. I know I feel it often, that my edges they feel like they're thinning in many ways in this particular moment in life. And so what would it look like to pull ourselves back? And to the question about where is God in the breath and the edges and the whatnot, the answer I think is yes. And it may also be all of them and none of them. Something about God that we experience in the holidays is that God is communal, and God is also deeply personal, and God exists in everything and in the nothing and everywhere in between. And part of what I love about the High Holiday experience is that you can find your voice somewhere in it. And if it's not in the machzor, it's in another reading, or it's in meditation, or it's in something like that. And this is an invitation for us to re-examine not just where we are, but where we are in our relationship with God. And for anyone who says that they don't have a relationship with God, I would invite you to perhaps reevaluate. Rabbi Eddie Feinstein would love to say that we all need to check in and develop a grown-up theology in terms of the way we think about our relationship with God. And can the High Holidays be an opportunity to reconnect rather than feel like it's off on the edge?
Well, thank you all. That's really beautiful. And to Corey's reference to the Ne'ilah and the gates that are closing, I've actually been thinking about those gates a little bit differently this year. Not as the gates of heaven that we have to knock on in order for our prayers to get in. I'm thinking of them as a challenge. Which gates do I want to walk through this year? Am I willing to be courageous enough personally to walk through the gate of hope, or the gate of love, or the gate of compassion, or the gate of action? What is the gate that I want to walk through? Or will I walk through the gate of fear, of not knowing, of uncertainty, of paralysis, of just carrying my own pain? The gate is what we choose. What we choose. So here's the last question for this evening. This is a softball. What are your favorite things to read on this topic of trying to do teshuvah? What do you like to read? What do you recommend?
One book that I recommend is Einstein and the Rabbi by Naomi Levy. I read that last year, and I find it extremely powerful. The idea of connecting to our soul and seeing the different shades of color of the flame of our soul and how we are all connected. I find that really, really powerful at this time of year, and how it connects to teshuvah is how we are all connected as humanity and through relationships, and that there's, even though it might seem like there's a tear in that relationship, we still remain connected, and there's still the opportunity for repair.
Thanks. There's also a lot of stuff in that book about the edge and where God is or isn't. Lovely.
I don't want to give away too much of my Rosh Hashanah sermon, but I always find, I think that you can find messages for teshuvah in all kinds of sources, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Jewish text. I know last year I had read a business book about, it was called it wasn't a business book, it was like an education book. It was called Late Bloomers, and it was about, people that don't follow their life timeline as much. This year I read a book, like it has something, it's something about like, I don't remember the title, of course, it's called like All Fish Should Swim, but it was about a 19th century ichthyologist, which I had to look up, which is, basically a taxonomist, especially for fish species. But it was all about this scientist who lost his collection of fish and then had to start rebuilding it totally from scratch. And from that, I was able to just get such a profound lesson about what does it mean to lose it all and have to start again. So I just think like when you come to the framework of looking for these lessons, you can find them everywhere. And I think it's really great to find them in sources that are not necessarily traditional Jewish texts. And it's always a fun challenge for me.
Totally agree. I was actually thinking when you said that about Brene Brown, and Brene Brown, and especially about vulnerability, because you can't do tshuva until you really examine yourself and you let yourself be open. So that really jumped out at me. And I also love the movie Groundhog Day, honestly. A funny movie, but it's like a whole movie about tshuva. So I went off the Jewish path too. I didn't want to say the Talmud because that would be too much of a layup.
PTBE is watching Groundhog's Day on September 13th, Sunday night, if you'd like to join. It's going to be a great discussion about Teshuvah.
Perfect.
There's also an update on the movie Palm Springs on Hulu. Groundhog Day. So, yeah.
A little raunchier.
A little raunchier, though.
Very funny.
I haven't watched it. I'm just kidding.
Bill, perhaps you should show Groundhog Day the next night after Rabbi Kingston does it, and then I can show it the next night. And then I love reading Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Most everything that he writes, I really enjoy reading. Actually, each year for the holidays, I try to pick a different aspect of Jewish thinking that I am exploring. And as part of some work I'm doing with the Institute for Jewish Spirituality this year, I've really been reading about Musar, Jewish character ethics, and Midot. And what does it look like to start to cultivate certain attributes within myself as a part of my own spiritual practice. And so I've been reading stuff about the Parsha each week and also some other Hasidic texts as a part of that study. And I think that one of the things that I'm learning, just to piggyback on what Bill said in saying the Talmud, I actually think that there's something about picking up a different aspect of Jewish tradition that you've never learned before and delving into that. It's such a huge... There's so much to draw from, and we often go to our go-tos because we're familiar with them. And I wonder what it looks like to pick up an aspect of the tradition that we've never looked at before in any depth and study it. It's a humbling reminder to me as a person, as a human, and also as a clergy person about how much I have to learn, even within my own tradition. And I wonder what it looks like to offer that invitation to all of us to pick up some aspect of Jewish tradition that you don't know and use it as an entry point into the holidays, into the year. Philosophy, Chassidut, mysticism, Talmud, whatever it may be. And so it's great to learn something that I haven't really learned in the same way before. And so that's what I'm doing for myself this year.
That's lovely. Thank you all. And I will just add that one of my favorite things to read on this subject is my friend Laura's computer screen. My friend Laura has a screensaver that flashes a message every 30 seconds or so. The same message over and over and over and over again. On her screen, it says, always begin again. Every 30 seconds. Always begin again. Well, we're about to conclude our evening together. We're going to end with Rabbi Corey blowing the shofar, as we've done all these past years, or at least most of the past years. Before we do that, and he'll blow the shofar, and we will all wish you a good night, and then our program will be over. Sadly, we're not able to stand around and schmooze together, but God willing, next year we'll be able to do that. Before we hear the blowing of the shofar, I want to thank Kimberly Gordon and Michelle Solomon, who have been behind the scenes, making all of this happen, making all of this work. And frankly, without Kimberly and Michelle, we could not have held this program this evening, and it would not have been as successful as it has been. I am hugely grateful to the two of them, and I know that you all are too. And I really want to thank our four clergy, Bill and Lisa and Corey. And Lisa, you have offered us a beautiful and profound evening of wisdom and teaching and sharing, both from the mind and the heart. It has been really, really, truly moving to me. And from what I'm reading in the chat box, moving to everyone who's written a comment. What a beautiful evening. We are so grateful to you for taking the time to bring the community together, all the community together, to really engage in true preparation for the Yamim Noraim, these days of awe, and to draw on the story that was shared with us earlier about Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir. If there are planks in our community that we all know that we can hold on to help see us through troubled times, to see us through the waves of life, to see us through the days of awe, it's you, our rabbis. We look to you, and you hold us, and you guide us, and we are all incredibly grateful to you for everything that you bring to your communities and to our Jewish community of the North Peninsula. Thank you really so very, very much. And thanks to all of you who are in the audience for joining us this evening. We're so glad you were with us. So now, Corey?
Before I do anything, I want to just thank my colleagues and friends for being a part of this tonight. It's wonderful to be with you. And I want to thank on behalf of all of us, you, Rabbi Lavey, not just for facilitating tonight, but you play a tremendously powerful role in bringing us all together as a North Peninsula community in ways that many of us see and in ways that many of us don't see. And your behind the scenes efforts and your thoughtfulness and the intentionality that you bring to guide us so thoughtfully is profound. And I'm grateful. I know that we are all grateful to you for your leadership. So thank you for all that you do to help us enter into this space mindfully. Yasher koach to you.
Thank you.
If you would like to rise, you're welcome to physically, spiritually, since we can't see those who are participating. If you're in your pajamas, that's okay too. But we'll invite anyone who would like to join for the shofar to do so.
Yasher koach, Corey. Yasher koach to all of you. Thank you all for being together with us this evening. Shana tova umetuka. May we all be blessed with a year of sweetness, of good health for us, for our loved ones, for everyone, and a year of peace. Have a good night. Laila tov.